following me. Like, what the hell is that about? I don't know. My son's like, there's some dude, maybe he stopped. It was like, ugh, making comments like, I don't like that. Well, I don't even know. I don't want to go into that. That's strange. Strange, and I don't like it. So, yeah, there are some weird folks out there, but who knows? Lily, either that or I'm becoming a major influencer in the education. So, whatever, I'll take that too. All right, so we've got that. I am recording this. Did I push record? Yeah, this is all going in there. Okay, so we go to unit 6, right? Middle Ages, let's open that up. And you can open that up. And this is about 10 points, I suppose. And, I'd like you to just listen to while I'm chatting. Is this the greatest PowerPoint ever? Probably not. But sometimes I just try to throw a lot of stuff in there. And talk you through it, right? I like thinking about what the story is behind this. Let's talk through it, and hopefully you'll find the answers to this as well. So my goal sometimes is for you to listen to the overall picture and throw your answers in there, not like, wait, what was that? What was that? So let's see how we do, okay? So let's do this. And I'm gonna ask one of you to let me know if how this is showing up on your iPad, or your laptop, or your something. No, it came here. Something. What? Okay. Is this? Oh, wait a minute. Come on. It's kind of strange. I don't know why this takes so long to do this. Mr. Moss or Miss Market, can you just tell me how this is showing up on your iPad? Okay, perfection. All right. Is everybody ready? I'm going to dim a light. Pardon me? It's ugly. It's so ugly. Okay. Weird update. All right. Well, you know what? I'm gonna write into them. All right. I implore you, focus over here now. Okay, so the Middle Ages, I'm going to tell you this story about the Middle Ages, and I would say right now, this is not a time that I would like to be alive. Many people are like, I want to go back to that time. You kidding me? Well, go through this, and you'll see if you would like to go back to the Middle Ages. But remember, bubonic plague, no penicillin. Okay, so I like to say it's maybe not the best time to be alive, but you do you. What? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Although our sanitation is somewhat better, people aren't, putting. Well, that and just like putting out their waste of all kinds in the middle of the street. You know that they used to go to the bathroom in this thing called a privy, which is basically high up in the building, and basically you go into a little room and there's a hole in the floor. Yeah. So careful while you're walking by underneath the privy. You could get a little something. Very disgusting. I used to think that if you took a bath, it was worse for your sanitation. Yeah, that's why people didn't drink water. It's just some people go like, oh my God, they drank ale and wine. Whoa, it's different, and it wasn't as potent, but also that was safer to drink than water. But not like kids are slamming back a 12-pack or anything like that. So, all right. So the Middle Ages is also known as the Dark Ages. When you hear Dark Ages, sometimes you're like, ooh, why are they in the dark? They're still finding things out, right? It's also known as the medieval period. And this time frame is somewhere from about 500 to 1500. This is a long, long time, okay? Think of it this way, as like if I were to say from 900 AD to the 1900s, okay? We're talking a long, long period of time, okay? This is after the decline of the Roman Empire and before the Renaissance. And next week, I'll talk about the Renaissance too. So you probably have the years. If you're paying attention, you already got 1 and 2 done, right? And what happens at this time?
Wait, what worksheet are we doing? There's no worksheet in classroom.
If you look in the Middle Ages, it should be. Everyone else have that open? Maybe you want to refresh, but it should be in there. Let's see if you find it.
I see it.
Oh, now I see it. Okay.
Got it?
Yeah.
Will these slides be on Google Classroom if we miss an answer?
Yes, the slides will be on Google Classroom. And guess what? I'm also filming this and that'll be on Google Classroom too. The fun doesn't stop, okay? And all the artwork I'm showing for this is from the Middle Ages too. Okay, so what happens at this time? There were these Germanic invaders, these German tribes that came in and kind of took over. There was also the rise of the Roman Catholic Church and feudalism. Ooh, serfs, things like that. And later on, bump, 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 the bubonic plague. So if you're looking for an answer to number 3, I think this is probably where you're looking for. Germanic invaders, rise of Roman Catholic Church, and feudalism. That's okay. That's all right. Here's the thing. I'm looking for you to get the main ideas, okay? Don't worry. And all these questions are good questions. We're just doing the best we can. And I want you just to get an overall idea about this. Can I just actually see a show of hands? Who's done their world history textbook assignments? Finished it. Christina, I doff my hat to you. You're the only one. The rest of you, I don't want to shame you, but what the hell is taking you so long? You've got something to memorize. You've got a bookmark to do. You've got a theme tracker thing to work on. You've got Romeo and Juliet to do. And I assigned this 2 weeks ago.
I want you guys to use your flex time for that more. I see.
Okay,
I know you need to socialize.
And I'm not trying to like call you out, but I am trying to call you out because we're trying to help you get these things organized. That means that you could have had time, 3 nights, you could have had time to get that done. If you really put it together, you could have done it in 1 night. Don't wait much longer. You've got other reading to do. You're going to have finals coming up. I implore you, I beg you, get this done. It's not going to take you very long. Okay? I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Isn't that the worst when your parents say that? My mom never said that. She would just be mad and start screaming. So I kind of would rather have the disappointment sometime. But in any case, but do this, do it, get it off your plate. You think you're going to do it someday and someday doesn't happen. So trust me, because I'm that person who's up till 3 a.m. the night before. I've gotten better, but we don't want that to be you. Okay, oh, lots of print on this one. So let's go into the Germanic invasion first. Okay, remember I said those 3 things that happened, 3 major things? We're going to talk about the Germanic invaders right now. And I have thanks Germanic invaders with sarcastic quotes around it. What happens at this time? Oh, can you even see it? Well, you can hear me speak it. Trade slows down. You had this big, cities were huge and popular and business oriented and people were making money. And then all of a sudden these Germanic invaders come and they don't do things the same way. All right. And trade slows down. And they're pretty good fighters, right? Trade slows down, businesses collapse, and money is scarce. European cities are no longer economic centers. If you can't see and you want to come over, also I will have these slides down. Okay, now for results, you just want some of these, but I want you to listen to me and understand, not just furiously copy the notes and not get it, right? So cities are no longer the centers of government, right? Population shifts. Now people are moving from the cities to rural areas and people are growing their own food. Used to be that the city centers were where it was all at, okay? Think of Athens in Greece, okay? Now people are moving out to the rural areas. The city is no longer a place to be. Learning declines at this point because these Germanic invaders who came in and kind of taking over, they couldn't read or write. They didn't have a written language. So the level of learning kind of goes down. That's not emphasized as much anymore. All right. And especially as the population moves to the countryside, they're not in a city where you've got a school nearby. Now there's also no common language, okay? Because of this dispersal of people going out in different ways and then the Germans coming in as well, right? So Latin changes and it becomes different dialects develops into French and Spanish and Italian. Those are all Latin-based languages, right? But mixed with the Germanic folks and also pushed off to their different areas, we get this different language. And again, remember, this is over a century of time. the Romance languages. Does anyone here speak French? Taking French? Are you speaking French in class? Not yet. Okay. How about Spanish speakers? Woot, woot. How about Italian? Want to speak a little Italian? I speak a little bit. I love it. Abbracciami. That means hug me. So you know how to say something in Italian. Abbracciami. Germanic society also didn't have citizenship. So the big thing about the Germans, these invaders, they lived in small little rural communities. Okay. And they were sort of governed, they lived separate from each other in these little communities. They didn't have a written language, and they didn't really have a strong sense of government. It was more like unwritten laws and traditions. A little bit, maybe you might say, is a little bit not as advanced as these European cities, major cities were, okay? Because again, think about Athens was very influential. We really didn't get to talk much about Greece in here too. We had to cut back on a lot of things, so sorry about that. Okay, also, though, this also starts the beginning of feudalism, and we're going to have that feudal pyramid pretty soon. But again, these Germanic invaders, remember, they lived in small groups in the countryside, and they brought this tradition into these major European cities and areas. And in the countryside, they didn't have a formal government, but they had a band of warriors who pledged their loyalty. Okay, so let's say there's a Germanic chief. He lives in this small community and he has this warrior. I say he because probably it was men in those times. You know how it was unfair that way. Warriors that pledge their loyalty to him, right? I am the chief. My warriors will fight for me. And in turn, we have a little bargain, a little unwritten law. You'll fight for me and I'm going to give you food. I will feed you. I will house you. I will even supply the weapons for you. Okay? However, if someone comes over here and tries to invade our community, you've got to have my back, right? They're willing to fight to the death. And they relied on this personal tie, okay? So the fact is, if I say this was our band of warriors and I'm the head chief, right? You know me, right? You know me. We've got this personal tie going on. I've been feeding you. I've been giving you a house. I'm supplying you with weapons, okay? We have this bond already we created, right? Now, say I had Mr. Lumen come in here. Maybe none of you have him for a teacher. And he's like, okay, so I want you to be loyal to me. Why would you? You don't know this guy. So they didn't get these Germanic groups that came in and kind of invaded. They didn't understand, why would you pledge your loyalty to a king? The king doesn't know me. He hasn't worked with me. He won't fight side by side with me. So they didn't get it. All right, so the definition of feudalism is, and you can also write this down too, because we're gonna have the pyramid of power, I understand. Feudalism is a political system in which nobles are granted the use of land from the king, and in return, nobles give the king their loyalty and military services. So kind of like that thing with the Germanic warrior and the warriors and the chief. Feudalism is this political system, and it's like, okay, nobles get land from the king. And in exchange, the nobles, will give the king their loyalty and military services. Okay? So it's a political system where land is exchanged for loyalty and military services. Kind of like that idea with the warriors and the chief, right? I give you somewhere to live. You've got my back when it comes to wartime, and you're loyal to me.
Is this in the packet? I feel like I remember writing this.
Yeah, maybe it might be in the packet too. We have a little bit of both. And this might make that packet ever so much easier for you. I was kind of hoping you had done it before. Okay, so now we've got this feudal pyramid of power. And if you can't see, if you want to move, there's some seats back here and back there. If you want to get up, I'm sorry, this visually, I know we're 6 feet apart, but it kind of sucks how this is going on. People at home, are you okay? You keeping up?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for answering. Okay, so the feudal pyramid of power. 9 goes like this. So we've got the peasants at the very, very bottom, right? And there's a lot of them. Above the peasants, you have the knights. They're also known as vassals. Okay. Above the vassals, you have the nobles, the nobility.
And that's the Capulets and the Montagues, right?
That is the Capulets and the Montague. When you hear a lord or a lady or a viscount or a duke or a duchess, for those of you who are watching Bridgerton, you're too young to watch that. However, there's a lot of titles thrown about that. Okay, so those are nobles are titled people. And then on top of that, you've got the one king. And you'll notice it's a pyramid because they all build on each other, but also the tippy top, there's only one king. At the very bottom, the base that holds it all together, there is a lot of peasants. Okay. Now remember, it's this exchange. I give you this, you give me that. Okay. So the king gives the nobles a huge chunk of land. And the nobles give some of that land to their knights. Okay. And some of that land goes to the peasants, or the peasants can live on it, work on it, but they don't really have much. Okay. And they also give protection.
So Mr. Rose, in the play, the prince is the king, right?
Yes, let's say the prince is the king. He's the highest in their feudal pyramid there, right? So they want to please him. The Capulets and the Montagues want to please them. And if you think of the servants in the Montague and the Capulet household, they're living in that huge estate that they have. I mean, this thing is like a little mini town, right? Okay, and in return, what happens? The peasants farm the land, they do all the work, right? Milk cows, whatsoever, and they provide food and services to the knights and also to everybody else up that ladder. The knights provide protection and military service, right? The nobles and the king are not going to go to battle. They need someone to go to battle for them. So in exchange for that land, they get this protection. And what does the king get from the nobles? Money in the form of taxes, but also the knights work for the nobles who in turn work for the king. Okay. 90% of the population, you know, I hear people talk about the top 1%, 90% of the population were peasants working the land. Okay, the lord, so in the noble class, the lord provides, so like Lord Capulet, Lord Montague, provides for their basic needs, including housing, food, and protections from invaders that repeatedly strike Europe. Now, I think in Romeo and Juliet, this is probably the latter half of the Middle Ages. It's very rough because Shakespeare is writing this during the Renaissance, but it takes place in the Middle Ages. But from what we right, and from what we see of this, though, too, it seems like the population is growing back in the cities again. The slow move back to the cities because Verona is a bigger city. Okay. Social class was inherited. You couldn't move up. You were born a peasant, you died a peasant. Don't even think about getting married to someone on a higher level than you. Wouldn't get approved. Okay, did you draw that feudal pyramid of power? Okay, and there's going to be more stuff about, yeah, the nurse, she'd probably be considered a peasant too. The servant who had to deliver the invitations, remember, he couldn't read. And how servants didn't learn anything like that. And how far removed from all of that was Lord Capulet, where he was like, here, there's on these invitations out, not realizing the people that work for him don't know how to read.
And also that's why the nobles married each other.
Yeah. And sometimes would you have some distant cousins marrying each other? If that was all that was around, that happens. Yeah, Vaughn.
What's the thing that the nobles do the king?
The nobles to the king, protection and military, money and knights. So they again, they have the knights on their land and they give them to them. Yep.
So like guy in Romeo and Juliet, what's his name?
The
City in France.
Lord Paris,
Yeah.
he's a lord.
Is he a noble?
Yeah, he's a noble. That was good. He did a great job. Don't make fun of my dear.
He's a count and he owns.
I thought it was Lord Paris.
What?
Was it Count Paris?
Yeah, I think they call him
Yeah,
Count
so
Paris.
anything with a title, so like Count or Lord or Viscount or Duke, I'm trying to think of other ones, those are part of the nobility. And how do they rank against each other? I got no idea. Okay.
It has something to do with how much land they own.
But I think a duke is bigger than a viscount, at least according to Bridgerton. I confess, I watched it. My mom has watched it 8 times. She's 94, people. Yeah. Hi, Mary.
Say, I'm a count, and then people always live with
No. You're given, so it's inherited. And also, how is it inherited? Years and years and years before, whatever, the king has said, I declare you the Duke of Canterbury and you control all these lands. And that's part of your lineage. So you couldn't just be like, hey, the Count of St. Paul, like, no, show us your, like, no, we haven't
So
heard
think
of you.
about like a king or a lord captain owns a big chunk of land, right? And then he has, let's say he had a son or 2 sons. Each of his sons would get part of that land and then
Yep.
they become counts and they own a certain amount. of
Or
land.
maybe one would,
Right.
and the other, it depends on that. And then the thing is, okay, we've got daughters, good Lord, we got to marry them off
Yeah,
and get their own wealth. And we don't have any sons. That's why you find some people like, we need to have sons because that's what we pass the land and our title down to. We don't want that to die out.
right.
Okay. So no, you couldn't, because you'd have to have the land and the money to prove it too. Okay. So peasant life. And like I said, most of these paintings and it's a work of art was done during the Middle Ages. Peasants give the Lord dues, basically. So they have this land that they can live on and work on, but they owe the Lord 2 to 3 days work worth of labor farming his land. Okay. So they can stay, they can also grow some of their own food, but 2 to 3 days worth of their time is just taking care, is working for the Lord. Not the Lord like God, the Lord who owns their land, right? Kind of, again, remember, we've got this exchange of services. I give you the land and a little hut to live on. You give me your labor, okay? And often peasants feel the right to stay on land and have that protection from all these, because this is, again, especially in the beginning, this is a rough time. People are battling and fighting and all this stuff's going on. They feel that protection is more important than the freedom to leave. And if you're a peasant, you couldn't marry without your Lord's consent. So I'm peasant Paula, and I want to marry peasant
The Lord-
Paul.
I have a question.
Yes.
The Lord is king, right?
The Lord is a king, or whoever is it. The Lord is not the king.
And
The
how many
Lord- Pardon
how
me?
many peasants are there going to be?
There's 90% of the people are peasants.
Yeah, but like how many is that? Like,
I don't know. It depends, honey. Great. It depends on the amount of land you have. But if I have a piece of land, I don't know how much land I have. It can vary, but I have 90% of my population living there will be peasants. Okay. Does that make sense?
yeah, I get the 90% part. I was just wondering how many.
Like how many people would be on it? It just depends. If I have a little piece, maybe I just have 40 peasants living there. If I have a huge thing, maybe I have 200. Maybe I don't know everybody that lives on there. Okay.
Okay.
Depends how much the king gives me. Yes, Lily.
Could you move down?
Why would you want?
Well, like if something happened, like could you move down? Like Romeo, like could you move down?
Well, you mean if someone got disowned? Mr. Master, do you want to say something?
She actually points out
Yeah,
something does happen wrong.
something, and I don't know if you've read that part yet, but again, if say something happened and you got banished, chances are you still had some money to take with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you could start anew and live an independent life. Maybe you wouldn't own land, maybe you could buy land or something, but it's,
You could be stripped.
yeah, again, it all depends on the situation. Could it happen? Sure, it could happen. Okay, it depends, and I'm going to go into that with women too. But yes, you can go down. You can go down for sure.
I mean, there could be a fire and all your land gets destroyed and now you've got no crops and nothing.
It could, but the king could give some. Like it
Right. You get some
it depends.
crops,
But you may anger the king and the king takes away
Yeah.
your title.
It depends. You could marry someone else. So in another country, power likes power, right?
Is that when the paintings for number 6?
No. So can I show you? I'm going to show you the paintings later. Okay. Okay. So just now, just listen to the story. All right. So again, you couldn't marry without their lord of their land's consent. So I just want you to understand, 90% of the people live this way. They thought it was okay to live this way. And it's worse for a serf, okay? So a serf, well, most peasants are serfs. And there's a painting of a serf. We're not examining those paintings at all, though. I'm going to talk to you about the rough life peasants and serfs had. If you want to take notes on this, it's fine. A couple of slides later, I'll talk to you about
Is this one of the pictures that, like the paintings that we have to describe?
No, it's not. I'm talking about peasants and serfs for a little while, but I will let you know when we get to the pages. So just kind of listen to the story. All right. So most peasants are serfs. And if you're a serf, it means you're not allowed to leave the place where you were born. Okay. So most of them, 90% of the people were peasants. Most of those peasants were actually serfs, meaning you're stuck on the land. You're born here, you're staying here, okay? Now, they're not slaves where they can be bought and sold, but they were treated like slaves, right? Whatever their labor produced belonged to the Lord, okay? So I told you, like, peasants gave the Lord of their town like 2 to 3 days worth of work. Yeah, the serfs, everything they produced belonged to the Lord, okay? Doesn't he look miserable? Okay. Peasants and serfs paid a high price to live on the Lord's land too. Remember that idea, that reciprocity, right? Here's some land, we'll protect you from invaders. However, you have to pay a marriage tax. So you want to get married, first you need the Lord's approval, then you've got to pay a marriage tax. Then if you want to grind your grain, in our little granary over here, you pay a tax on that too. You need to belong to the church, and you've got to pay a tithe, a tax, a payment to the church as well. Okay. Have any of you seen any of the Robin Hood movies, or the story of Robin Hood? Yeah, with the fox and everything else too, for sure. Remember the Sheriff of Nottingham? He's always going around trying to shake down people for their little coins, a little church mouse. Remember the little mouse? Trying to get more taxes, okay? Were people being taken advantage of? Yes, indeed. Okay, so the average life expectancy, if you were a serf or a peasant, 35 years, right? At 55, I would be an anomaly. I'd be dead and gone, okay? Why? Malnutrition, illness, hard work. Okay. Why did people put up with this? There is, yeah.
Maybe because like they feel safer under like because he obviously has all this stuff, we can trust him.
That's a great answer. So maybe they feel like we got to trust the king, right? We got this far. Yeah, Antoine. Oh, okay. Yeah, Catherine.
Maybe because like they were born into it, like their parents and their parents' parents have been in the same like system, like they're just they can't really do anything.
What power do they have to do anything? They're poor, they're hungry, but you're right. Their parents, they can't leave this place. They haven't seen anybody else do it successfully. They're born in this place. They have to stay there. What can they do? Right? And also at that time, many people thought God determined your place in society. God made me a peasant. I gotta stay a peasant. Yes.
What happened if they tried to leave?
If they tried to leave, they would be found and either forcibly brought back or killed. And so many of them are so afraid to leave too, because again, it's not these cities were walled for a reason, and these areas, they needed all that protection because there's a lot of fighting going on too. So I think they felt that they had that protection as well. And yeah, so could some escape? They could try to, but I wouldn't know that they'd get very far. Because again, no one wants to be known as a person who had a serf escape from his land, right? Then I'm going to be seen as weak if I'm the Lord. So horrible, horrible, horrible. And it's funny because people will say, in a past life, I think I was a princess. In a past life, 90% of the people were peasants. I think we'd all be peasants, okay? So not going back there. All right, Here we go. Now it's time to do the artwork, okay? So describe what you see in these two paintings from the Middle Ages. These two paintings, okay? Now, I want to tell you something. We just saw a little bit of, I don't even know if we saw much Greek and Roman art, classical art. You might have skipped over that, but if I'm sure you've seen statues, usually white marble statues of very lifelike. Did we show the Antigone one?
No, oh,
Or the one with Haiti? Oh, dang.
I don't think we did.
Oh, poops. Well, that's a really adult thing. Poops. Okay.
I can't tell if it's a man or a girl.
Just write what you see. Write that down. We'll talk about it. All right. We'll talk about it. I promise you.
It does.
I promise you we'll get there. Okay. So just write what you see and say, I can't tell. Anything like that. Maybe the colors you see. And we'll look, when I talk about the Renaissance too, we'll compare those as well. I throw this in because I love art history. So personal. Now it's getting personal. And describe it. And if you want to get up and walk around and see. So when you think about Greek and Roman classical art, and like I said, usually, I wish we'd shown some statues, but usually they're usually marble, right? But very, very lifelike, right? When you think of classical art, very lifelike, very much a celebration of the human form, okay? The Middle Ages or the Dark Ages was a little bit of a step back in some ways too. And again, this was over a century, right? But the Greeks and the Romans wanted this natural representation, have the body look like a body, right? We'll see that come back in the Renaissance where people would study skeletons and the musculature to have it look like a real body. This stuff here is definitely more abstract, okay? This is no longer looking like how you would see something in nature. Not to be rude, but this is Mary, that upset looking woman, cranky, constipated looking woman is Mary. And that little old man in her hands is baby Jesus. I've never seen a baby look like that, nor do I want to. Okay, she looks like she's just got some kind of pain. I don't know, but it's very flat, right? You don't get an idea that she's a lifelike woman. Yeah.
She also looks like a dude.
Yes.
Like she's not very feminine.
No, she's not. And her face looks flat, like all of her features look flat. And like I said, I've never seen a baby look like a little old man, but there you go. He's got that going for him too, but very flat. You'll see the colors, there's lots of blues and reds and greens and things like that. There wasn't a whole lot of paint mixing for more colors, and paint was very expensive too, especially if you're getting that blue color. Religious art was a big deal too. So if you look at Middle Age Madonna and Child and Mary and Jesus, you will see a lot of pain looking Marys and a lot of little old man Jesus. Okay, so no disrespect. I'm sure they would probably like to be remembered in a different way too. Okay, this is actually people climbing on board a boat. It looks so strange. There's no sense of perspective, right? They look really huge compared to the boat, but again, it looks very flat. And people look very like, I don't even know how she's holding this baby. How does he have the neck muscles? But they all look very stiff. Now, Mr. Moss, was Augustine, I know there was a Saint Augustine.
Where to?
Was there also a Pope or a King Augustine? Or is this more the saint? Because I think it's a saint because he warned against the temptation of idolatry. So not to make them look like human figures, okay? Because if I make them look like us, like human figures, then I'm not Mary. How could I possibly be like Mary? So they'd rather have these figures that stand more as a symbol and not looking like things you can be found in nature, because Mary wasn't your average everyday lady. Okay?
But of course, also remember, no makeup, no, nothing. Women didn't look,
Well, right. But she just looks so dreadfully sad,
yeah.
like cramps or something. I don't know. She just looks upset. Maybe because her baby looks like a little old man. I don't know.
Her
I
she
would
knows.
look like that. Mine just made it look like a 22-year-old man.
22, get up close. He looks like a 50-year-old man. He's got a receding hairline, but he's got a lot of fluffing in the back. But he does. He looks like he's like, I got a deal on a car for you, Mary. Sorry. But when we get to the Renaissance, we'll compare the idea of Mary and Jesus and other portraits that are so beautiful and so lifelike and look like there's a loving bond between the two.
Yeah, she's like, why is this child in
Right, right. And he's like, don't even cuddle me. I don't want that.
there? He's like, stand out, like, no, peace out.
Yeah. Oh, poor. Well, these artists are probably rolling in their graves like, that's not what I meant, my good woman. Okay, so you described that art. So now we're going to look at women in the Middle Ages, and we're going to look a little bit about Juliet. I don't think about this in terms of Juliet, right? Because I'll tell you right now, what if Juliet had had sex with Romeo before they got married?
That is a crime.
Hey, that's happened throughout time immemorial, right? And if he decided to marry her, no one's the wiser. Sometimes people would say, oh, they had an 8-month-old baby it's premature. That's a very healthy looking baby, okay? But they'll push up the wedding date. But if he just was like, no, I'm out of here, she's ruined.
She's disgraced, she's gone.
She's just, so all of her hopes and dreams, and again, marriage was like a business contract. Your parents kind of wheeled and dealed with this to have you, they want Juliet to be in a good position, to have wealth. Also, they want to have an alliance with Count Paris. He's got a lot of wealth too. Then they keep that in the family. Their wealth could possibly grow. And her prize really is her virginity. Okay.
And her ability to birth a baby.
Right. So heaven forbid she's married to Romeo and she can't have any children for whatever reasons. That happens too. Many women are discarded like that, or they'll take another wife.
That also to give birth was dangerous.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. But not to mention though, some even, and this is all because not every woman bleeds when they have sex for the first time. The hymen is this tissue that kind of expands and contracts, and not everybody bleeds when that happens. And I'll talk to you more about that with sex too. But oftentimes people would look for blood on the sheets after a wedding night to prove someone's virginity. Heaven forbid your hymen didn't rip and you're not bleeding, but you're just like, what do I do now? Okay. So really not only that, but Juliet can't leave where she lives. She's like, Romeo and his friends are out. Whoop, let's go through the marketplace. Let's have a little sword fight with Tybalt, whatever. She can't leave. She can't even leave to send a message to Romeo, let alone meet Romeo. She's got to arrange for her nurse to do this. The nurse has got to bring an escort too. She leaves, I think, because she's saying she's going to confession so she can get married. Okay. So no choices for women, right? What were their choices? And many of them at this time were not educated too. Some were a little bit, but not. It was like, what's the point? So they had their choice was either be married, and then you become a mother, or you become a nun. Okay. Whether you were a noble or a peasant, you were considered inferior by nature and law. Now you might think a peasant woman, she might be more free to walk about the land and have a job, although she's giving all of her work to the lord of the manor, right? So the nurse might have a little bit more freedom than Juliet, but not much, okay? Laws were always set by the lords or the kings and the male heads of the Catholic Church. And they thought they were protecting women. and protecting women's value. But if they only thought of their value as uterus, baby making, and virginity, there's so much more to women than that. And look at this poor woman. Here's another painting. How'd you like to wear that hat? And again, this whole flat look.
And of course, they didn't want to educate women because if they were educated, they might try to get out of their situation,
Right.
right?
Exactly. And it just was never done before. Never done. In the Renaissance, you'll see some renegade women getting, you'll tell, I like the Renaissance a lot better. Still, though, no penicillin, so life was rough. Okay, so again, marriage was the single most important event in the lives of men and women. Not because love, love, everlasting love, but alliances, having babies, having heirs, making money, okay? And it really was a family decision. And again, this is some more artwork. Believe it or not, here's a wedding picture or a painting. So here's the bride and the groom, priest and everything. And again, so flat. Yeah. Okay. And the husband was considered the woman's master. And if you were disobedient, you would be beaten, amongst other things. So girls were often married by the age of 14. So think about when you got your first period, you would be considered marriageable age, right? They often had their first baby by age 15. So you can write down these as part of your facts about women in the Middle Ages if you want to. So married by 14, had their first baby by 15. So Juliet really isn't that young. She's 13. Her dad would like her to wait a couple of years. And they were taught to obey men, their fathers, and after they got married, then they had to obey their husbands. Now, some women could learn a trade, like say your husband was a blacksmith, and I could help my husband in his work and learn a little bit of blacksmithery, but I couldn't go on and be a blacksmith on my own, okay? And I couldn't join guilds or like unions at that time. We don't have time to go into that, but I couldn't join a guild. I certainly couldn't earn the money that a man could make. Women could only own property if it was inherited from their fathers or dead husbands, okay? So say I married Lord Smith. Thank you, Lord Smith. Hello, hello. And then Lord Smith died. I get his property. How nice. But what if I see Lord Jones? And Lord Jones is like, let's get married. Okay, let's get married. I lose my land. Okay. I get his land. Yes. Yep.
If you were already married and then like your husband died, would people want to marry? Would they
Yeah.
still want to marry you?
Sure.
If you're wealthy.
They might be, then the land might be in my new husband's name, but it's not mine anymore.
They inherit like the money too of their dead husband.
Mhm.
Or would it go to like their family?
Well, it wouldn't go if my husband died, but I had a son, part of that money when he became of age would go to him. And let's hope he would take good care of me.
So would like the only way that a woman would be like be by herself and actually like have a living is if she was a widow?
Yeah, and was able to oversee the land and have it running properly too, which could be a difficult thing too. You're right. You're right. Every wife from 20 until 40's first duty was to give her husband a child, preferably a son. But, and here's a painting of someone having a baby. She's pulling on those ropes. Yeah, producing children was dangerous and exhausting. There were no drugs or medication. Again, infections, if there was some tearing, the risk of infection was very high, of bleeding out. Now we have things like cesarean sections and different medical procedures that can help the labor and delivery of what otherwise at that time could have killed the mother. So often there was a short lifespan for women too. And dying while giving birth was a common death for young wives. So the church thought they should obey their husbands. And it was interesting because at this time the church started to have two different ideas about women. right? One idea is that they should be pure and holy like the Virgin Mary, right? But the other idea is that they could not be trusted and were a moral danger to men like Eve. Isn't that strange? This idea that women should aspire to be as holy as the Virgin Mary, but we also hold up Eve as an example too, who is someone who can challenge men and challenge their thinking, right? And I'm going to go out on a limb here. That whole duality of thinking about women, we even see it today. Can anyone tell me how you see that today? Pure, bad. Oftentimes women are judged on their sexuality, right? No one wants to be a prude, but no one wants to be called a slut. And that's deep talk and deep thinking for something else. But that idea of women, have babies, but don't be too sexual, and be innocent, but also we can't trust you. It's not just something that's in the church. It was kind of it's been all around for a long time. All right. And the other choice, so again, married or none. So this was really the only alternative. If you were an upper class woman, if like Juliet's level, if she didn't want to become a wife or a mother, or if she wasn't able to bear children, she could be sent to the convent too, right? But they could leave lives of work, prayer, and guess what? They can study as a nun. So a nun might not have been a bad thing. And sometimes they could oversee male priests, but rarely. Okay? So the first thing is to get married, have children. That was a dangerous adventure oftentimes too, or they could become a nun. So we're going to see, I'll give you a little tidbit of a hint. At one point, Juliet does not know what to do and she feels trapped. And Friar Lawrence is like, I'll get you to a convent. That was the only solution that he had for her. Nothing wrong with being a nun, but like you don't want to do that because you have no other choice. One other thing, so again, when we're talking about this stuff, and you can jot these things down, just something to think about. While we're reading Romeo and Juliet too, though, again, I want you to understand that even though there was a lower life expectancy, they were still teenagers, right? Their brains were still not fully developed. And again, think about that hastiness. We think it sounds romantic, like, oh my gosh, they just met and they're getting married. Oh, that's the beautiful language and it's romantic. But my goodness, they could have taken their time with this. What if Romeo's like, I'm going to woo you. We're going to have Friar Lawrence talk to me. We're going to have a courtship, things like that. Could things have ended differently? But they really were thinking very hastily. Even in the fights with Tybalt and Mercutio, no one really thought that through. Again, that prefrontal cortex could have helped him from that horrific incident too. The other thing I want you to think about, in the beginning, what does Lord Capulet think about Juliet getting married to Paris? Yeah, Mary. Yeah. So he thinks, hey, this could be a good idea. You're a worthy man for my daughter, but let's give it a couple of years. I think she's still young, which if you're looking at this point, she really wasn't too young. Let's give her some time. And also let's see if she falls in love with you. Okay. So you might say maybe he was more an authoritative parent, a little bit looser, still strict, but also wanted to hear what his daughter had to say. As the play goes on, and it's such a short amount of time and emotions start running really high and things are going to start colliding, Lord Capulet goes from being an authoritative parent to very much an authoritarian parent, where he's going to insist that she does what he tells her, or else.
This happens at the end of Act 3, so we'll be reading that this week.
And the or else, think about what we told her, that you do this or else what? You're thrown out on the street. What does Juliet do then? She's thrown out on the street. She either becomes a nun or
Prostitute?
she can prostitute herself.
She was already married to Romeo.
Well,
But Romeo died.
before that, Romeo gets banished. Have you read that part about the Oh, I say too much. I say too much, but all I'm gonna say is there's a storm a brewing, and everything that can go wrong
There's a storm.
will go wrong. And again, haste and caution. There's going to be a lot of hasty decision making on the part of the dad as well as Friar Lawrence, Romeo and Juliet. It's like, slow it down, people. This is a train wreck. Yes, Gabe.
Oh, I got a question.
Yes.
So, does Romeo's like parents ever like appear in
They do in the beginning. You hear like Lord Montague talking with Capulet when the prince is like, hey, this fighting going on between your guys and your guys, stop it. So he has a little bit of there. At the end of the play, he'll speak a little bit more. They don't have the lines and the part in the play as Juliet's parents do, because Juliet is relying on her parents. Romeo can be his own man a little bit. Father Lawrence is kind of a substitute parent for him, but he's kind of already, he can do whatever he wants. Juliet is controlled by her parents. That's a great question.
Romeo's parents like care at all? He's married someone that's
We don't really hear about that. They probably wouldn't like it though.
Oh, they would not have stood for it.
No,
They wouldn't have stood for
but
it.
we don't really hear from them about this because again, he can go and marry kind of whoever he pleases. I mean, it's got to be the same level, but it's not the same as Juliet.
Right.
And even if he's like, if they say this marriage is not, has to be annulled, no more marriage. Juliet, sorry, off to the convent with you.
Mhm.
Romeo, hey, you can marry someone else.
The Montagues do come into the scene though, where the prince declares what his punishment's gonna be for killing Tybalt.
Right. But
And of course, they try to advocate for Romeo, like, hey,
Mhm.
Romeo's just avenging his friend's death. And so that comes into play. So they do advocate for Romeo.
Right.
in this
They're not,
scene
yeah, and
coming up.
they're not hands-off parents. Okay, well, I mean, at this point, all those parents are kind of hands-off a
Yeah.
little bit, but they do care about him. It's not like they've written him off or anything. Anybody else have a question about the play or anything we yacked about? All right, so go ahead, honey. Pardon me?
Should we turn this in?
Turn it in. Exactly,
now.
turn it in. And I'm sorry for scolding you about not doing that history homework. I say that, like, I think of you almost as my children. And I love my kids hard, but if they need to get it together, I'm gonna tell them to get it together. I'm really scolding you because I'm worried about you in a week or two from now when you're gonna be overloaded, okay? So I'm not trying to shame anybody. I want you to get your work
Actually,
done.
next week, like, I'm thinking it's
Yeah,
not bad.
so I really do. I don't want to shame anybody.
How many weeks do we have for the final?
There's this week and one more full week, and then the week after that is finals, so,
Until we don't have finals, it's supposed to be very-
no. spring
Nope.
break isn't until the end of March,
I
so.
know,
we
that
literally-
is earlier though.
But usually this tends to be the hardest part of the year, right? Coming up to the second trimester,